After I announced my resignation, Emily sneered at me, and I shot back a silent, steady gaze. Our conversation had focused on the company's decision to reduce labor costs, with special scorn directed at those who were allegedly abusing overtime pay. Tom also seemed to enjoy the idea of cutting costs, and a week later, my phone kept ringing with calls from the. When I responded, the president asked, "Who exactly are you?" I couldn't help but laugh at the president's question. I introduced myself as Lily Johnson, a 59-year-old employee who has been with the company for 37 years, since graduating from college. I explained that our company provides administrative services, especially to Vizzy. I was proud to manage 45 clients, a responsibility that had become overwhelming despite the help of a part-timer. Despite the difficulties, I was unable to display any signs of weakness because our clients were long-standing relationships, and their struggles motivated me today as I sat in front of Tom, who is 7 years my junior and the head of the tax department, drastically changed his demeanor 3 months ago after being promoted. His once polite tone was replaced with condescension and complaints, making every interaction difficult. Even after I countered, he remained unfazed. Tom and Emily's constant harassment on my computer was a major burden on my mind. Emily, Tom's assistant, joined in the harassment, taunting my efficiency and making fun of my rank and file status despite being the first to turn down a promotion to department head, something neither Tom nor Emily knew, and telling me to refer to the manual for guidance and cautioning against needless actions. I vowed to carry out my regular responsibilities, but their harassment continued while I was with Tom, accusing me of increasing overtime and calling it a waste. Emily agreed, sighing, and said that my continuous overtime was hurting the performance of the entire tax department. Tom's recent act of leaving a month's worth of client files on my desk to be filed by the end of the month was the reason for my overtime, and after work, my face was pale as I looked at the files before me. Wait. These all have deadlines this month, I said bewilderedly, but before I could realize how serious the situation was, Tom had already packed up his desk and was not interested in listening to my worries. "I'm heading out. Take care of that," he said casually as he hurried out of the office, leaving me with a mountain of urgent tasks. Emily then added insult to injury. Injury with a mocking laugh, the absurdity of the situation weighed on me, and I let out a deep sigh as I opened the client files strewn across my desk. To my horror, some of the files had originally belonged to Emily, and I realized why Tom had been harassing me so much. They wanted me to retire as soon as possible. Tom's unapproachable manner and unattractive appearance made everyone avoid him except Emily. It seemed that Emily's proximity to him was strategically motivated by Tom's preference for younger female employees and their shallow thinking. My extensive experience and deeper knowledge of taxation made me a preferred resource for other members of the tax department over Tom. Despite these difficulties, I had to manage the declarations and prepare tax declarations for my assigned companies. Emily's harassment was not just a personal vendetta. She was also an attempt to curry favor with Tom, who was assessing the performance of the tax department. It seemed like today's workload was far from, but asserting that working overtime would only lead to complaints from Tom and Emily. So I resigned to the idea of working unpaid overtime. Then, out of the blue, I was summoned to the president's office. Our company had recently experienced a change in leadership because the previous president became ill unexpectedly, and the new president, who was the former president's son, wasn't entirely familiar with our. The president dropped the bombshell, "Lily will need you to resign by the end of this month." As I walked into the office, I saw Tom and Emily grinning unpleasantly. The tense atmosphere made my head spin, and I asked for clarification. It seemed that Tom and Emily had accused me of overcharging for overtime, stating that while others had about 15 hours, I had exceeded 80 hours. The president, who was unaware of the true situation, appeared impressed by Tom and Emily's zero overtime. The truth struck me: the inflated overtime was a result of working for Tom and Emily. But disclosing Tom's instructions ran the risk of coming across as my own incapacity to effectively manage time. I gave the facts. The president sighed deeply, expressing doubt but acknowledging the lack of evidence to pursue the matter further. Despite this, he insisted that they couldn't retain someone working at such a slow pace, resigned to the situation, and asserted that I hadn't overbought for overtime but had struggled to finish my workload within regular hours. When the president offered my resignation, it appeared that he had already made up his mind to leave the company I had worked for 37 years. Despite my dedication, I felt a sense of exhaustion set in, and I agreed to step down at the end of the month. acknowledging that I had already informed the president of my decision. I looked at Tom and Emily. As they left the president's office, Emily's obscene smiles conveyed satisfaction. Emily thanked me sarcastically for leaving, and I shot back a silent look, but Tom shared his disapproval of labor cost reduction and called me someone who took advantage of overtime pay. As I watched their happy exchange, I wondered that. During the handover process, I created documents for each of my clients, made sure that everyone said goodbye properly, and made appointments with those I could meet in person. Since I was unable to meet with the president, I had to use letters to let them know who would be taking over. A week after my resignation, I was relaxing at home when my cell phone rang, and I saw the company's call. I hesitated. I had already finished the social insurance procedures, but after receiving repeated calls from the company and Tom's and Emily's personal phones, I reluctantly answered. When the president asked me who I was, I couldn't help but sarcastically respond that I was just an unemployed woman who had quit from the company. Reluctantly, I rose from my seat and walked back to the company, where I found Tom and Emily waiting. Their faces were noticeably petrified, with dark circles underlining their tired eyes, and I was shocked by the drastic change in their appearance. He explained the chaos that had occurred since my departure, 49 calls to halt transactions of the company, and his plea for my immediate return revealed a sense of panic in his tone. Tom glared at me when I asked what was going on, telling me that ever since you left, we've been inundated with calls to halt transactions, not just from your clients, but also from potential businesses we were going to introduce. What did you do? Emily confirmed the suspicion, saying that men were dismayed at the idea of me using dishonest methods, and their gaunt appearance suggested the toll. Although I hadn't manipulated the clients, I had a suspicion as to why the transaction had stopped, because cancellations were inevitable. I muttered my thoughts to Tom, but he accused me outright of planning something and insisted that I go to the president's office right away, escorting me with force. When Tom and Emily and I arrived at the president's office, the president greeted us with a direct look in his eyes. Tom said, "I brought you with me," with an air of authority, and Emily quickly followed suit, ignoring their accusatory tone. The president then asked me why the transactions had stopped so suddenly. After I left, I took a deep breath and explained that our clients don't need us. To handle their taxes, there are tax accounting firms that provide less expensive services, but they stayed with us because of me. Tom retorted, criticizing my value to the company, and Emily made fun of me. But I persisted in explaining my special method of providing customized tax-saving techniques that appealed to our clients, and Tom dismissed it as ineffectively claiming that their manual-based operations were more practical. The president sighed deeply, acknowledging the fundamental difference between our approaches. In a serious tone, he said, actually signaling a crucial revelation or decision to follow. Some clients who had stopped transactions went straight to Dad, who negotiated on my behalf. I hadn't expected clients to visit these links for me, and Dad stressed that my contributions were the reason the tax department flourished. In addition to effectively managing my clients, I also helped my colleagues' clients by sharing knowledge that even Tom couldn't match. Dad revealed that if Emily looked shocked, likely struggling with the thought that I could have been her superior. The current president apologized for forcing me to resign initially and asked if I would consider rescinding my promotion, saying that if I hadn't turned down the opportunity, I would have held a higher position than a department head by now. Tom interrupted our conversation, clearly upset and protesting the president's decision, asking why I was chosen over him. Emily echoed his sentiments, praising Tom's leadership and expressing disbelief at the preference. Dad said that I was indispensable to the company, and I appreciated the change in the president's perspective, but I was hesitant to accept his resignation. Tom's face turned pale when the president revealed that he had been forcing the creation of client declaration forms onto subordinates, including Emily's work for the tax department after I resigned. The president then sternly addressed them, revealing that numerous complaints had been received from the tax department indicating they had been shifting their workload onto others. Tom struggled to defend himself, saying he was only mentoring Emily as her superior. But the president produced receipts from the several clients, pointing out the irony that Tom had accused me of being a salary thief while observing Tom and Emily's pale expressions. The president also revealed an alleged leak about their romantic involvement. When the president accused them of failing to fulfill their responsibilities, inflating expense claims, and breaking company policy by having an affair in the office while married, the accounting department revealed that Tom had filed dining expenses. When confronted with the evidence, Tom was sweating heavily and was unable to come up with a convincing explanation. Emily turned ghostly pale. In a straightforward manner, the president announced that Tom's and Emily's employment would be terminated immediately. Tom pleaded for their jobs and promised to retract the receipt claims, but Emily carefully echoed his sentiments, expressing her fear of being fired and promising to apologize. I have a family. Sensing their desperation, I offered advice. Why don't you stop resisting? It's undignified. Tom glared at me and said, "Shut up." Understanding the seriousness of the situation, which included neglecting duties and having an affair with a supervisor who was worried about her reputation, she begged for another chance. I turned to the president and asked, smiling, if I should share the additional details about their misconduct. Tom looked away, and Emily bit her lip in distress. I sighed and reminded him that he was the one who got me fired. It's just karma. What goes around comes around. Why don't you take some responsibility and reflect a little? Stop me from worrying about more publicity. I gave them a warning that wrongdoings would eventually be discovered and urged them to face reality before things got worse. Both Tom and Emily fell to their knees, and the president decided to fire them right away. Later, I exposed more of their wrongdoings, such as Tom pretending to go on business trips in order to spend days with. Tom and Emily's strategies were relentless. They constantly reprimanded and pressured employees out of my sight, frequently assigning abrupt tasks with tight deadlines the resigned employees had initially had. Emily and their sneaky tactics of harassing disliked employees into quitting despite my attempts to help those employees asked me to remain silent. But since they were now contentedly employed somewhere else, I felt it was time to speak up. The president, incensed at my revelations, said he was going to look into past exaggerated expense claims in detail. Tom, crying, thanked the president for not reducing his pay out of concern for his family's welfare. I learned about the situation when Tom contacted me to ask for help in getting the president to rethink their dismissal of Emily and Tom. As the truth about Tom's affair with Emily surfaced, it led to Tom's divorce, and the two are now facing claims for compensation in the divorce lawsuit, marking the consequential aftermath of their actions. Due to the close-knit nature of the tax industry, word of their wrongdoings spread quickly, making potential employers reluctant to hire them. Desperate for money to cover living expenses and divorce compensation, they turned to day labor at construction sites, which was a drastic change from their previous employment. Prior to working in an office, Emily would frequently call me crying and beg for help, saying, "Lily, please help." I only wanted a better life, and I never truly liked Tom. Despite her tears, I couldn't deny that their situation was a direct result of their own behavior, and I reminded Emily that many people, including myself, had been impacted by it. Decisions you can't unring a bell, I told her that facing hardships was the result of her choices, and Emily's desperation was evident in her protests. Despite her regrets, the outcome stayed the same because, for me, I decided to keep my distance from the chaos of the corporate world, even though the president asked me to do so. I refused to return after being told to resign because I didn't want to. Instead, I found comfort and helped out at a friend's tax office, which helped me supplement my income and live a more laid-back lifestyle. In the future, I considered opening my own office where I could serve my clients without being constrained by corporate bureaucracy in my own space and give my all to my work. Needs of my clients as a tax accountant, I wanted to be on an equal basis with my clients, offering services without being superior. This was the start of a new chapter in my life, one that was full of thrills and chances to go after. What was most important to me in my second life had only just started, and I was looking forward to the path ahead.